So, hi, I'm Lisa Bradley Godward, and I wrote this novel called Wize AWAY, and it's about a horse-loving American teen's spiritual adventure to a future age of world peace in the Baha'i faith known as the Golden Age. And people always ask me how long it took me to write. So it took 3 years from sitting down and writing it to editing, re-editing, publishing, revising the published edition, etc. That was in 2010. So from 2007, when the book is set, to 2010. But I was gathering notes for about 10 years before that, which was sparked mainly by Harry Potter. Because as the series got darker and darker, my training kicked in of, put up or shut up. Either don't complain about something or be ready to fix it if you're going to complain. And so I challenged myself and I said, what would I do differently? Well, for firsties, I would make the main character a girl. I feel like Jo Rowling sold us girls all out by making her main character a boy. Why did she do that? And secondly, as the series went, it got darker and darker, and every book somebody's trying to kill him, and it's just like, so why couldn't I have my main character, a girl, go someplace great where people are lurking around every corner to try to help her instead of kill her, right? So those were the first thoughts that sparked, my whole project here. And then, of course, back to the question of how long did it take me, we can't discount my entire life before that, because when Abby, is in her home time, she's 13 in Book A, as I call this one. And that's based heavily on my life. And one of the reasons why is I was not well when I started that endeavor. And I didn't have the brain power to just invent everything from scratch like Jo Rowling says she does. She says her favorite thing is to sit in a dark room, sit in a room alone, and make up stories. And I'm like, but you have to have a brain to do that. And my brain isn't working very well these days. And so I had to use what I knew and what I had readily available to me, which was a lot of my own life and my own experience. And so I was 42 when I actually started to write. At that point, I'd been a Baha'i for like 35 years or something. And so we can't discount all that, background and reading and thinking and trying and information and things like that. And I did sit down and just prop open World Order of Baha'u'llah, I think it's pages 202 to 203, to try to cook up my world of the future. Okay, great. Fine, Lisa. You want to make some cool place where somebody's lurking to help her unexpectedly. What's that going to be like? You're trying to imagine the Golden Age. And some people say, some Baha'is might say, quoting Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, that he says, who can imagine, kind of, and that could be taken like, don't even try to imagine, you can't. But I took that same passage like, who wants to try to imagine, right? And so I was like, well, with a lot of divine guidance, I'll try, And so that's kind of that was kind of the spirit with which I started it. Those were some of my resources. That was my personal situation at the time. And then hopping back to what we were talking about before we started to record, I now call it the Janabi Caldwell curse. There's an Andy Grammer curse too, but the Janabi Caldwell curse, I was reading in his book, oldie but goodie book called Follow the Instructions. And he says in there that basically no endeavor is going to succeed without sacrifice. Great. Lovely. Fine. Do I cut off my arm? Do I live in poverty to what kind of a sacrifice? Yeah, any of that, will work. And so I've sacrificed kind of like a lot of things for the Abby Wize. So the sacrifice, right, that I had to put in, or that we as writers have to put in, it's a real thing. And so that's one of the first things, that I wanted to mention in my talk here is the Janabi Caldwell curse, because we all watch movies and TV, and I read a lot of books. I'm always looking for some comparable books to mine, books that are fictional portrayals of a world at peace. There are not very many. If anybody knows of any, please let me know. Becky Chambers' Wildborn series, Book of Two, is the one that comes closest that I know of. But anyway, in those stories, they have to condense and represent things not as they really are. And so they make things look easy, and they make things look fairly linear. And I'm telling you what, when you really get in this spiritual realm of creating and trying to serve whatever faith you have, but in my case, the Baha'i faith, it is not linear. It is not easy. The sacrifice is required before you can, make any progress. And my own, because I'm very scientific about my spirituality, and I'm also very spiritual about my science and rationality, I feel like there's a corollary principle, which is the bigger an endeavor you want to do, the more you want to serve the faith, the bigger sacrifice is going to be required. Oh, even better. Great. Not. Thank you so much. But so I did want to mention some practical things, because did you see the flyer, Michelle? Mm-hmm. Okay, and so I kind of made some promises in the flyer of what I was going to talk about, and so I wanted to try to talk about those. So literally back of the envelope, notes here, but when you're inspired, which is, I'm going to address that in a minute. So I wanted to talk about how to organize, and that's one of the practical details that's easy to start with. So this is one of my props here. This is one of my visual aids, because it's just a paper that I literally fished out of the trash when I was thinking about what do I want to talk about. And the theme there is, when you get struck with an idea, capture it. Because
you will not remember it later.
Thank you.
You just don't. Yeah.
You just don't remember, do you? Cornelia Funke, who wrote the Inkheart series, which was then made into some films, right? She said, ideas are like butterflies, and if you don't capture them with your net, right when they're flitting by, they'll be gone forever. And I think that's a really great visual. And the documentary I saw about her, she's German, and she lives on a property with a pond, and she says where she got that idea, which she put in her books, was down at the pond, weeding or whatever she was doing down there, and she had an idea, and like the moth or butterfly that flitted by and was gone forever, she lost that idea, whatever it was. And so this is, a practical point that's easy to start with. I did not bring my master note box, but I brought these, and this is my first gift to you. I brought some gifts.
Very cool.
So I brought some little boxes, okay? And I tried to clean them up, take off my labels and stuff, if you want to paint them or, whatever you want to do. And then what I do is I've experimented with different sizes of notepads. So this is the size of notepad that I started with, right? And it's just from CVS, and they make it in white, which I prefer, and they make it in color. And I just buy a bunch of these, and I put them around the house everywhere with pens, pencils, right? And Since then, though, I found that I like a smaller note. Like a lot of my notes don't take a whole sheet of this paper. So since then I found this smaller pad that I like better. And so I just make little tabs with, I happen to have a very old collection of colored index cards. And then my box, the box that I use at home, I just, label these according to my different categories and cut out the tab, and then I file these, periodically, right? So my big tip there is when you have an idea, write it. Like, on here is great, but if you're not, like, I don't know why, Baha'u'llah, but we get all these ideas when our hands are not free. Washing dishes, in the shower, driving, weeding, whatever. And we don't have, the writing utensil and the paper. That's okay. Make a section on your phone or something. Because if you have these great ideas and you don't use them, okay, that's fine. But if you wanted the idea and you don't have it, you're out of luck. I mean, there's no remedy for that situation. So how to capture these ideas is what the How to Organize is really about. So I have a number of different ways to organize. One is this physical, notes. So on that topic, what I do is I try my best to label at the top of the note either what book it's for, because I'm planning a whole series. So I leave space at the top, and then I start with hopefully what book it's going to go in, book B, book C, etc. And the more information I can put down, the better. But then once you go to lay out all your notes, because, okay, you might file them in your box by topic or by book or by, whatever type. I have a whole tab that says one-liner jokes, for when I need some levity in a scene, right? And then I just go to the, well, what happens, how does this really work then? What's the next step? Well, the next step is when you get ready to write the book, you pull out all these notes and you arrange them more or less in sequence, right?
In chronological order.
Chronological order to how you are tentatively planning the book. And there's ways to do that, and I, anyway, get like chunks of wood, chunks of rigid plastic, and I lay out, like tiles. I lay out I'm trying to pick contrasting colors so the camera can see it. I'll tile them like this, so here's card A, here's card B, and I'll just tile them on my rigid surface, and I put those near where I'm writing so that I can see my title, because remember...
So you kind of have it all laid out, but it's stacked so that you can see the heading on each one and you know where you are.
Exactly, Michelle, exactly, right? So that's why I leave the top of this blank, because I may not know exactly how I'm going to use a thought until it comes to figuring out, oh, I really like this. Where can I put it in, or how can I write? Mm-hmm. So going along with that, I don't know if I have I have become a pen aficionado. I am a pen fan, and I have discovered there are now erasable pens that actually work. They actually erase. Like, raise your hand if you were a kid, now that I can raise my hand now. If you were a kid and they came out, Bic or whoever came out and touted erasable pens, and you were like, cool, and you tried it and it was
just
junk.
Tore the paper
it was so bad, right? Yeah, they fixed it now, 50 years later. So it's Pilot Frixion with an X, Frixion. And when I first, was advertised them on Facebook, or something, and I went on Amazon and they had like 22,000 positive reviews, and I'm like, what? They fixed it? You're kidding, right? And they work, and I just have them everywhere around my house. Now, caveat, the reason they're called Frixion is that there's a little, is this one? No. Okay, let's pretend this is a Frixion. It's not. This is a Jetstream. This is the mini. Sorry. This is the point.
About this?
I'm real serious about my pens. This is a 0.5 Jetstream, and the New York Times, the reason I learned about these is that the New York Times regularly runs, reviews on things, and I read the New York Times online edition every night, and their pen people, I don't know who, said that Jetstream had been their number one favorite for like 15 years. And come all challengers, Jetstream is still their favorite, right? So that's how I learned about that, and they're right. And so I have, not here with me, but I have the 0.7 that's my go-to pen. It doesn't blob, it doesn't, right?
So what's it called again, a Jetstream?
Jetstream.
Who makes it, or what's?
Amazon. I guess Jetstream makes it. No, I'm kidding. Uni makes it. Uni. So this is a 0.5. And I find that for me, because my handwriting is narrow, and I like the 0.5 because I've got a kind of a small piece of paper, and I can get my thoughts, kind of a lot of them on here without smearing and running out of space and mishaps and so on and so forth. So Jetstream, is my regular pen go-to. But day in and day out, I'm addicted to all my erasable pens. And they make knockoff generic brands as well. So here's the caveat. The reason that they call it Frixion is that there's a like eraser kind of a deal on the end of a Frixion pen. And if you want to erase something, which I do all the time, you rub it, and the friction erases the color. It's kind of like the ink is still there, but you've rubbed the ink out. Well, bad news is if that ink gets hot for any reason, it disappears.
Oh, okay, so it's sensitive to temperature.
It's sensitive to temperature. It's the heat
Oh,
from
so
the
it's heat
friction
from
of the
friction
rubbing.
that actually takes it out. Interesting.
Now, having messed up and like left, some notes or whatever, lists or whatever in a hot car, the remedy that works okay is put it in the freezer. And it'll come back enough maybe for you to copy it again. It is crazy. But so all of these like criteria, like, okay, I'm making this note. What pen do I use, right? Like, how big of an idea is it? Is it likely to be subjected to heat, or do I not want it to be possible to, right? Anyway, it's pretty nuts. But so there are other systems for organizing, and probably I've tried them all. One is to make a note wall. Like, there's some really beautiful, I don't know, still pictures or Pinterest, collections or YouTube videos or whatever, where they like take color-coded sticky notes and put them up on a wall, right? And I'm just like, oh, like my artistic soul is just like, I love this, and color-coded too. I can't resist color coding. I have something like that, but the problem is that once you write, it's kind of back to the writing dilemma. Once you write on a certain color of thing, it kind of in your mind gets locked in. And I'm never that sure about where stuff's going to go.
Yeah.
My books are too...
In theory, but that's too, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just... And so what I have instead, like, is a bunch of these, like, with a... This is my other secret weapon. This stuff. Ta-da!
Oh,
Okay, this is Crafters. What in the crafting world they call a snail, a tape snail, right? And you pull this off, and there's two-sided sticky tape under there, and you go zzz, and then lift it. Miraculous stuff. The key about this stuff is it's removable. That's the key. That's why this stuff, instead of double stick tape, right? So that's what I have. Yay! And I love this stuff because what I'll do is I'll write my note and I'll stick it with this up on the wall. If I really need to, yeah, like if that seems to be, like if I have a complicated scene or something like that and the tile method laid flat isn't working for me. I also have like paper clotheslines thumbtacked to my writing room door. So just take a string, tie a knot in both ends, thumbtack it to the door, door.
Pin stuff up there.
And then pin stuff up there. And because I'm winging it so much, I kind of am happy with the box and the tile that results from it and my clothesline and my wall, arrangements. And I probably have a couple more that I'm not remembering. But the bottom line is we have to organize for our project and what makes sense to us. That's the bottom line. So I'm bringing, mentioning options. I've tried all kinds of things, these cute little flip decks of cards, color-coded, look, which didn't work, but, I love it so much. Anyway, just hopefully that's some inspiration for thinking about how to organize, because generating and capturing a whole bunch of ideas, that's awesome. Have to do that. That's the bedrock. That's the foundation. But if you don't organize, like Baha'u'llah says, look to the end in the beginning. And I chant that to myself a lot, because the more that I can plan, the less of a mess it is when it comes time to write. Because you got all these, I'm going to say hundreds of ideas potentially. And the further you can get along the road, like, okay, this is a thread that I want to go in book Bravo and book Echo, and then grand finale and finish out in book I, because I'm planning 9 books. And so in letters, that's I is the 9th. Well, how do I organize that? Well, it's really pretty easy. You put at the top of the note B, D, E, I, and then you just move the note as you write the books from file to file. Oh yeah, I want to do this thread too, right? So, but thinking ahead, how am I going to do it, right? So that's like kind of one of the easiest topics or aspects of writing, a Baha'i type or a spiritual type project to cover. So I also said in my poster that I was going to cover how to not preach. And I'm talking to myself there. So it's super interesting because this gets into feedback, because I did my best, and in my original edition, I had passages, right, of Baha'i writings, and I just did what I thought would work. And then feedback from one of my, longtime Baha'i friends, she said, it's like I'm sitting in class and I'm being lectured, during the parts where the Baha'i faith is explained. And, I'm like everybody else, that feedback is tough.
Yeah.
Feedback is hard to take. But what I keep telling myself whenever somebody gives me difficult feedback like that is, it's kind of like, it's good for you, take your vegetables anyway. She was right, really, when I looked at it. And so that started me on a question, okay, how do I fix it? Because I knew at that point when she said that, I knew I was going to rewrite the book. And among the things I wanted to fix was stuff like that, stuff that I was better now, and I could, not necessarily physically better, but I was a better writer. I had more facility with the story I was trying to tell, and et cetera. And so what it comes down to, in my mind, is breaking down what is preachy. First step, any argument, define your terms. Preachy, what is that exactly? Well, one is that it goes on too long. That's one element of preachy. Another is it's heavy-handed. It's like, I'm relaying God to you and you have to accept it because it's God, and right? It's like, it's just a little much, like as far as the superiority, tone to it. And another is it's a one-way. The preachiness, right? It's like, I'm not asking you for your feedback. What did you say?
Yeah, I'm telling you.
I'm telling you this, right? So those kinds of things make preachiness. All right, so taking each element, how do we fix them? Well, break it up. Don't have long passages where it's a monologue. Secondly is put it in everyday language, like put it in context of a character reflecting on this. Humble it down a little bit is the wording that I, choose for myself. And then also, let there be interaction in there, not just short, but interaction, like a conversation, like, well, I've been thinking about, instead of this is the way it is, right? That's kind of the essence of how I think of it now. And so I did dial down the mentor character, Dolly, in my book. I did dial down her preachiness. I felt, was more successful. And the feedback that I've gotten now is that it is more believable and less heavy-handed, right? Any comments, any questions on the preachiness aspect?
No, that's very cool that you were able to come up with the very specific things that make it preachy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because...
Kind of a litmus test, and always having more readers is better. Right? I mean,
Right.
even if you don't want to hear what they have to say, it's
Right.
very helpful. Because if a couple of them didn't get it, or it didn't work for them, then something's definitely wrong, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that,
Yeah.
Michelle. Yeah, I mean, I have to say that I flounder in the land of lostedness a lot.
Land of what?
Lostedness is what I call it.
Lostedness.
Lostedness. And when my friend gave me that feedback about preachy, and it was, written, it was like a Facebook Messenger or something like that, and there wasn't any warm, fuzzy tone to it, and it kind of slapped me in the face. And I banged around not knowing what to do with that. It felt like a cold prickly. And a lot of feedback feels like that to writers. So what we have to do in the natural horsemanship method that I practice and that I put in the book, it's called Pirelli, and Pat Pirelli's a real guy, and he's still alive, and he's very funny, and everything that he says about horses is very true. He says it's all about your emotional fitness, that your emotional fitness is the hardest to get, and yet it's the most valuable. And so as writers, I was kind of like, buck up, Lisa, here's somebody that took the time to give you feedback, however brusquely, and my, inner self thinks that it's valuable, but I just can't get over the cold prickly of it. So what do I do? And so I had to just counsel myself until I could look at that, because it was like slamming into a wall of spikes. I mean, it just felt so bad, that critique, right? But she did me a huge favor by telling me that, a huge favor. And I just couldn't see it for quite a while, at first. So taking criticism, right? Whether folks say, it's preachy, whether folks, whatever they say that's negative, quote unquote, or it isn't just raving, that's where the gold is. That's where you're going to get help making your writing better. It's a hard road to hoe back to the Janabi Caldwell curse, So if I sacrifice my comfort, if I sacrifice my self-esteem, those kinds of things, it's about humility and nose to the grindstone. That's what it's about, right? No matter what you're doing, but in this case, writing. So whatever criticism, that you get, try to get over the feeling of having been slapped in the face. And if you need to break it down and define the term and go step by step, do that. I recently read a book, a Baha'i fiction book that I had high hopes about. It sounded good, I'm really picky myself. I am so picky. I don't read horror, I don't read thriller, I rarely read mystery, and even then I gotta like space it out with other stuff. I don't do romances. I, of course, don't do like, the smuttier stuff, what they call in my reading group, spicy, it just means heavy on the sex scenes. I don't do those, right? And then also, I don't know if this is me at my stage of literacy or whatever, but I don't do poorly written. And so this lovely Baha'i fiction book that I had high hopes for, bought it to support her and started to read it, and it just had so many mistakes in like the first 5 pages. And I'm like, eventually I was like, I know it's going to be hard on me and hard on her, and it'll probably ruin my acquaintanceship, I can't even say friendship with her, but I need to let her know that the quality of writing is turning at least me off, one reader. And back in my journalism days, they used to say, if you get 1 letter to the editor, they stand for 10 more people that feel the same way. So like if 1 person bothers to write or say something, there are going to be others, who feel the same way. So I let her know that there were just too many errors for me to get past. And her response, I understand completely, but her response was, not every book is for every person. If you don't like it, you don't have to read it. And I'm like, you missed my point. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to do is say, you need another 2 or 3 edits. That's what that means. Go back through it, The key question that nobody asked me, but I'm going to answer anyway, is how many times did you edit your book? Because I happen to be fortunate to have a degree in journalism. I double majored in journalism and art from the University of Nebraska, and then 3 minors as well, all of which I'm using. Oh, surprise. I use that writing experience, but it didn't help me at all for writing fiction. And writing fiction is way, way harder than writing nonfiction. So what I wish that people would ask me, well, what I'm going to answer anyway without being asked, is how many times did you edit your own book? Because I have editing experience. I was trained in editing as well as writing, so I went ahead and edited my own book. It's a completely different skill set. It's hard. If you have both skills, you can edit your own writing. It's hard. I went through that book myself 30 or 40 times. And then I rewrote it and went through it another 5 or 10 times. And these days, newsflash, I'm just finishing making an audiobook of this revised edition. And I found at least 50 errors that I'm fixing and going to put into yet another edition of this book. It's going to be the same cover and everything, but at the end of the editor's notes in the front, or author's notes, introduction, whatever, at the beginning, I just put version, 2, version 2.1, version 2.2, right? So that's, just a little bit about, how to not be preachy, and kind of by extension, what to do when you find you've made other types of mistakes, right? Like how to handle it. And what you said, I want to pick up on what you said about test readers. I mean, was that what you were saying, test readers?
Yeah, I definitely have people that I have regularly read my essays before I send them out. I want to know that they're clear, I think I'm a good proofreader, but if you don't catch it the first couple of times, you will not see it at all. Like, that's just how that works with my own writing. Like, I can pick it up on other people's stuff better than mine. I want to know that, like, oh, that didn't really work for me, or I thought you meant this when you meant that. Like, I need to hear that. So yeah, I want more than one other person to read things before I...
Right, and even after I got an editor and she went through it, and I went through it a number more times and stuff. There's still going to be mistakes.
There's still going to be
just
stuff,
always
yeah,
going to
yeah.
be
As soon as you
mistakes.
print it, right?
As soon as you
Oh,
print
no.
it, somebody will find another mistake, right?
It's just the deal.
Okay, and then I also wanted to talk about how to be original yet dignified. This gets into, some weightier types of topics here with writing Baha'i inspired or Baha'i infused content. The answer to that is actually pretty simple, even if it's kind of deep. And so, how to be original. So again, break down the terms. Let's just take one at a time. Original, how to be original. Well, have ideas. Well, one of the most common, questions to storytellers in particular is, where do your ideas come from? Where do you get your ideas? And always the bottom line is anywhere and everywhere. If we make a habit, as us Baha'is are supposed to do, of reflecting on things, thinking about things, reviewing things, trying to put the Baha'i writings or any religious teachings really into practice, we're going to start to make connections or, see analogies of things or.
I thought it was interesting that you mentioned reflection, because I think about that a lot, and I know for myself that if I'm too externally busy, there is no headspace for any of that to come through. So I really have to have not just actual pointed reflection, but also just quiet and space in there, for things to arise that I would even notice that I had an idea in the first place, so.
And for some reason, tedium, I've been really drilling into tedious tasks.
They're great for that.
They're great for that. It's kind of a corollary of the cracks, or where the light gets in your spirit, or your pain, your painful past events or whatever. And it's the tedium is where the inspiration happens, as a corollary, right? Just recently I read that Nikola Tesla said, be alone, get alone, solitude. Being alone is where the ideas come in. And I was like, okay, but yeah, overlaid the Janabi Caldwell curse. Aloneness plus a few dozen tests that you don't know how to overcome. That'll help things open up, won't it? To point you through to, how it is you want to do something that looks impossible, right? So, yet dignified. Okay, this is another easy topic because there's feedback from friends, and you can specifically ask for certain kinds of feedback. Would you please check this for the dignity? Would you please check this for the preachiness? Would you please check this for mistakes? Would you check this for flow? Would you check this for character believability? All these kinds of things, right, can be monitored once you know what they're called and that they are monitorable, and have somebody who can dissect your work from that angle. Okay, now I want to mention in there too is that there's a thing called Baha'i Review. And this is the Baha'i Review Office. The U.S., which is where I am, has one. And they have a mandate from Abdu'l-Baha specifically to review for really just two things: accuracy and dignity. And if they choose to, they can give you tips or, other hints, or something like that. That's a whole other topic, Baha'i Review. But especially if you're making things up and it's not just straight quotes, we should put our book through, or our work through, Baha'i Review. Now that's a different Baha'i Review than a book review that the publishing trust does to decide if they want to publish your book. And there's also a separate review that Baha'i Distribution Service does to see if they want to carry a book that's already been published. So don't be confused about the 3 different kinds of Baha'i Review, but the one for accuracy and dignity, it's called the Baha'i Review Office, and it's beleaguered and they're way behind in their work, so allow plenty of time for your work to go through. And if it's just quotes and you've used the most accurate, up-to-date version of that quote, you don't need to submit it. But if you're making stuff up, especially fiction that involves the Baha'i faith, and you're mentioning the Baha'i faith, then yeah, you really, should get it checked. Okay. So the last thing is book self-publishing that I wanted to mention. Book self-publishing is the way that most Baha'i authors are going. I have struck out 3 times. I don't know what that gets me. Benched, maybe. I don't know. But in getting the U.S. Baha'i Publishing Trust to carry my book, there's been inquiries on both sides through the years. But in the end, my view of it is it wasn't Baha'i enough for them, right? Because it's not just like loaded with all Baha'i stuff. It's a secular, type of story. I did it that way on purpose. I like it that way, but it did cut me out of being distributed from, by Baha'i distribution services. The U.S. one, anyway. So self-publishing, I have another talk on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Wize Media, no spaces. Wize is spelled with a Z, so ABBYWIZE Media. That's my YouTube channel. I have another talk up there on self-publishing versus what I call traditional or contract publishing. It's a whole big deal. It's constantly changing. I went with what some people derogatorily call a vanity press, which means you pay them to take over certain tasks of publishing for you. It wasn't perfect, but I was happy that I did that at first. They got me my ISBN. They listed it on Amazon. They did all the formatting for the printer, yada, yada.
Huge, yeah.
It's a lot.
Uh-huh.
And when I rewrote it and put out the revised edition, I took one step more, and I set up my own publishing company, and I published through Ingram Spark. And I'm telling you, it's a lot. And I'm comfortable with computers, ? But a lot of that stuff was way beyond me, and I wound up hiring people, to take some of those, anyway. And now with the latest round of revisions that I'm, going to be doing, hopefully the last, if I'm lucky, I have to go and hire somebody again because the program that most competent editors want to use is InDesign, and it's a specialty program. I don't want to subscribe to it. I don't want to learn it, and so I have to pay somebody.
It's Adobe, right?
I think it's an Adobe product, right? And so I'm going to have to pay somebody who knows and can work in InDesign to make all my fixes, and then I can't even open it because I don't have it's just kind of but it's worth it. I mean, for those of us that really feel, as I do, this is my mission, this is my calling on earth, is these stories. Everything I do revolves around this. If you feel the same way, and you have a book like mine, maybe, or a project like mine where it's not going to find a contract or a traditional publisher, then self-publishing, or vanity, presses, publishing is probably the way for you to go. So there's one, last thing that I wanted to mention is that when we think about writing our project, most of us have a severe attack of self-doubt. Most of us. And so women especially, unfortunately, tend to really talk themselves out of something that's bold and daring like this, because it's a big hill to climb to write and then publish a book, however you publish it. And so I want to quickly break that down, and then I have an ending thought. So the self-criticism, we are well served to ask ourselves, where is that coming from? Okay. If it's, I'm not worthy enough, okay, that can be addressed. My deep feeling is worthiness comes from proving to yourself that you can do something difficult, something treasured, right? And so you can build yourself a program to build your self-worth by trying littler steps. If the whole write the book and publish it is like too far, too much, break it down and set yourself a program. This is actually something that we can build, is our self-worth and our belief in ourselves. When we start writing something, if it's bad, why is it bad? Can you tell I'm a big fan of breaking things down? Have to when we're trying to save the world, which is the goal of the Baha'i Faith. So, is it bad because it's unskilled? In other words, it's just it doesn't have polish, or it's not very well done. Okay, so that is a program that you could also run. Read. The number one advice is, if you want to be a writer, read a lot, especially in of comparable works to your work, which I'm a little bit stymied on that because there aren't very many world peace books out there. But you can possibly get instruction, get tutoring. There are such things as writing coaches, lots of options. I tend to always be a person who is always wanting stuff that isn't made yet. But as long as I know what to enter into Google or Amazon or YouTube, right? It's amazing what I find out. So it boils down to drill down into the core issue and see if you can put it in words, and if you can, see if you can Google that, right? Or search it somehow. Now, it could be bad because your underlying premise doesn't work. It could be that the story itself needs adjusting. That's a little harder to tell, especially for a beginner, but if you get somebody to look at it or to hear your elevator pitch, which you should boil down your premise into a very short 1 or 2 sentences, and get folks to listen to that. What would be their interest? Does it work? What are the problems that you're going to face, and how are you going to solve those? So it may need repurposing, or reworking the actual storyline, the premise, the sequences. Maybe flashbacks don't work. Maybe flashbacks are needed. Maybe, all those kind of stuff. Okay. So there's a closing thought that I have here, that if we're doing this for God, if we're doing this for good purposes, right? God has everything. So how can we, mere puny mortals, offer anything of worth? Well, again, breaking that down. What God doesn't have is things like mortality, time, sweat equity, sacrifice. God doesn't have any of those. Those are on our realm. Those are our gifts that we can give, as well as dedicating the work that we do to God. And I've had people, one of my favorite stories is, I was on book tour here in California, actually. I was boarding my horses, moving out of Hawaii, moving to Arizona, stopping in California. And I was giving talks and, selling the book around. And I held this book out to this lady. I had told her what it was about. And she just held her hand above it. And she said, "Ooh, this is a good one, I can tell. I'll buy it." She could tell the prayer and the sweat and the sacrifice. That she didn't even look at the cover. She didn't even crack the inside. She just was like, whatever her spirituality was. I haven't heard back from her. I don't know if she liked it or whatever. But there are sensitive folks out there who can tell, right, that you did your best, that you did it for a higher purpose, that you're, trying to do something worthy of God's, good graces, right? So our thoughts, our efforts, our intentions matter. The focus of our lives between, the chores and the duties and the downtime and whatever. So if in between those things we have to do, we choose to do something for God, right? That matters. Like that's like brownie points up in, the big tally board in the sky, right? Prayers, that we may say when we're either trying to solve a problem with our story or just we're sitting down to do it. If we just infuse it with that energy, it might not even make a visible difference, but it might. So we just try, and I made this a major theme of book A is try, and I've only become more sure that it's all about the try, right? And then we can also do whatever part we can see to build the kingdom of God on earth that God wants us to. He has said this in every religion. He wants there to be heaven on earth. He wants there to be peace on earth, right? And so us Baha'is are really rolling up our sleeves and trying to do this. So whatever that looks for you, whatever you can do, try. That's my thoughts for tonight.
Thank you so much.
I was pondering on the drive over today. I don't know why I'm so focused and in my zone, but I am. It's like I kind of know when I'm on track and off track. It kind of relates to Martha Beck. When Martha Beck on her podcasts and stuff, she's a super interesting lady, and when she talks about how to find your mission, your passion, she's like, if you're pursuing your mission, if you feel like you're on track or if you feel like you're off track. It's as simple as that, except for sometimes it's not that simple because you feel off track and you're like, where, what, how, of the what, and I just think that seeking is another major theme of life on this plane. We're always trying to find something. And usually I know when I'm on track, but not always.
Well, we need way more new stories too, and I often start fiction books, not for young adults, but for, and just go, nope, because it's so cynical, or it's so dark, or and it's not like of course, life has its, but I'm just looking for something that's a little bit more, what do I want to say? It's not so jaded. So
I'm with you. I'm really with you.
Sick of it.
By the way, my book is...
It's easy to do that, I feel like. It's
it
easy
is.
to point at the problems and to be...
jaded.
Talk about how relationships fall apart and how dysfunctional everything is.
I'm
We can
with you.
all describe that.
Totally with you. By the way, my book is rated for 13 through adult, and I find that my biggest fans are adult
Adults.
women. Whether for themselves or, kids or grandkids, that kind of a thing, so.